Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Do you ever feel like you're doing the journey alone? Have you ever felt like that you just need someone to talk to, someone who could bring some perspective into your world? Or maybe you're not the type of person who learns from watching video courses or reading books, and you just want to talk with someone specifically about your challenges and how to break through them. I want to introduce you to the High Performance Men's Coaching Program. It's an intensive coaching experience designed to unlock a man's full potential in his life, business, and relationships. Over this past year, I've brought together and trained some of the best coaches in the world to help men step up, stop playing small, and become the strongest versions of themselves. Learn more about High Performance Men's Coaching at kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. You are not alone, and we are here to cut through the crap, hold you accountable, and challenge you so that you can make your dreams become a reality. Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Howard Falco. He's a peak performance coach to some of the top athletes in the world and an expert on mindfulness and understanding human potential. Howard is the author of I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, and also Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. Howard, some really powerful books here. I'm excited to dive in. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in and get straight to the goods and go in with a favorite success quote or some sort of saying that you've lived by that's helped you on your journey.
Well, a success quote by someone that I think sort of epitomizes the journey we're all on is one by Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first person to climb Mount Everest. And he said that it's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. And that's sort of a mantra that is the theme of a lot of my work.
Is that something that you see as being one of the biggest variables to peak performance in an individual?
No question about it. It goes to the core of human belief. When you're talking about peak performance, whether you're in business or whether you're in sports or any part of your life, it gets very finite at the top level of performance. And so that separating factor ends up coming down to belief. In sports, I see this all the time. You have guys that have some great talent, and it's almost indistinguishable between two individuals. But what it really comes down to is how they feel about who they are, their identity, and their belief system.
And where do you see physical and the whole mental, the emotional side of peak performance? At what point is the physical unnecessary and it's more so about that emotional? It's more so about how that person talks to himself.
Sure. Well, I think once you accept where you're at and what it takes to be there and the level of talent you need to develop within yourself and the amount of physical work that you need to do, and that's been checked off, that's when it switches over to the mental. At every level, whether you go from high school to college or the professional, that increases exponentially as far as the work and the focus and what's really the grind and the sacrifice to achieve that. But once that's attained, then it comes down to the separating factor, then switches over to the mental side. And that's when that gets revealed in what happens with each individual, whether or not they are achieving their goals or not. And that's where I come in with the work.
Really interesting points here. I was recently watching a documentary about an ultra marathon runner who was a woman. It was on Netflix, and this race is about 250 miles. It's I believe she said it was close to 10 marathons is this race. Wow. And she was talking about how a lot of the top ranked ultra marathon runners, I think it's not even an ultra marathon, it's something bigger, the name of these types of runs. The top people are women, are the ones who are ranking, the ones who are constantly and consistently ranking high in these races. the majority of them were women. Not to say that men are not up high, but just overall, when you look at all these different races. And what I'm drawing here is that the mental side of it is clearly a huge aspect in an ultra marathon.
Wow, that is such an interesting observation that it's women, and that can lead to a lot of the work, because a lot of the work that I do, you have to come to a sense of compassion with yourself enough to accept yourself on a level that would allow that type of performance. And since the feminine brain is definitely geared more towards empathy, love, and compassion in the general sense, I got goosebumps thinking about it. It's actually very interesting to see how that's the case with women in that race.
Yeah. And so how did you get started with Peak Performance Coach to some of the top athletes in the world? What route does one take to become that? And did you ever see yourself doing this when you were younger?
No, not really. It was really an unnatural route, if there is such a thing. I got my degree in finance and was in the finance business for the first 15 years of my life, but I was always a very big seeker and deep questioner of life itself. And so I asked a lot of questions in my mind, out to the universe, etc., wanting to know answers my whole life. And what happened, the short version of the story is, at about 35, married with 2 kids and working hard at my job, I sort of had this moment where I just threw my hands up and said, there's got to be a greater understanding, because I was really working hard and killing myself trying to achieve the American dream and have more, be more, do more. And what happened was I realized it wasn't working for me. And I just sort of threw my hands up with a deep yearning and said, I want to know more about life. And over the course of the next 6 months, those answers started to make their way into my awareness in different ways, shapes, and forms, to where I had what's called, looking back on it now, a peak experience, where my mind and my insight on the nature of life, or my awareness, expanded very rapidly in one moment. And it created a great sense of bliss, for lack of a better word, sort of absorbing this new awareness. And then I decided the best way to honor what happened was to write about it, teach, and share this insight to other people. So I wrote I Am after that, and it got published. And then what happened was I was starting to work with individuals with all different issues in life, whether relationships, marriage, teens, just individuals going through different things. And I started to get calls from athletes who said, hey, I read this and it changed my results because I looked at myself in a new way, which caused a new experience for me. And this started to happen more than once. And it was both with college and professional athletes that I was getting calls from. And so I decided it was a natural fit for me. And so I started working with them, and one thing led to another, and started to get a little bit of a reputation, and then started to work with more of them.
So what is it about self-awareness that unlocks more potential in an athlete? Or because you said you work with all types of people, so I'm assuming that this can also apply into the workforce, or into any specific art or some sort of craft for an individual.
Yeah, wow, that's such a great question, Andrew, because it is the crux of it all. And the thing about self-awareness is, when you go down that path and you're willing to self-reflect and take a look at yourself, and you're willing to dig in, you find that you really haven't made a mistake your entire life, and that life has been one big learning experience. And a lot of times, either through our DNA from generations past, or our nurturing, or our upbringing and personal experience, we're very hard on ourselves. And that limited sense of identity of ourself creates these subconscious limits in what we believe we can accomplish and achieve. And that happens at every level, in every different experience, whether it's relationships, business, or sports. And so to drill down and to see what keeps one from dreaming, thinking, believing, and acting from a bigger field of possibility is the key. And through self-awareness, it raises the self-respect one has, the self-honor, the compassion, the love for oneself, which then expands that possibility field. So then naturally your ego goes to work to help you fulfill the new identity and create the new experience. Because in my work, I talk about the ego. It really supports whatever our truth is. So if that truth can be expanded, then it's a natural creation process. So that's a really good question. I know it was a kind of a long answer, but that really drills down on it, on the core of it. It comes down to personal identity.
And so let's take a case study, perhaps of someone that you've worked with. You don't have to say their full name. You could just say their first name and maybe the industry or the sport they were in. And they came to you and they were lacking in this self-identity, lacking in self-awareness. You worked with them. What were the steps you helped this client go through? And then what were the results that person got?
So let's say client A, it's at the top, Major League Baseball, and they previously saw one version of themselves, which they believed they could get to be at that level, but yet they were still working on the next level of understanding, which was performing at the highest level within their position in Major League Baseball. Could they actually accomplish that? And what thoughts or limiting beliefs did they have that we could bring to the surface where they felt like that was true for them, that why they couldn't do it? And let's challenge those to see what makes you different than any other human being or any less worthy than any other human being at this level. And I have a nice quote on my desk that I really like. I think it's true for anyone to ask themselves, why not me? Like, why not me? What is it that prevents me from seeing and believing in that type of potential and those type of results? Am I courageous enough to look and see where the difference, what I need to learn physically, what I need to learn mentally to get there? And if I'm unafraid to see that, you know what, I've got to work on that change up because it's not major league stuff yet, and it's got to be better, and it's got to be timed at the right time in the pitch count. And I've got to learn to play better chess when it comes to facing a major league hitter, because it's really a test of two wills between the batter and the pitcher in that moment. And I've got to outplay him in that moment and have my stuff ready. Is it that caliber? Is it good enough? And so it's just challenging them to see that that is possible and there's no reason why they can't achieve that, and breaking down any limits to that process.
So do you use other people like, hey, this guy has been able to do it, so why not you?
Right. Well, that's the cool thing about sports. There's plenty of examples of athletes that have achieved it before. And anytime you have somebody that's done it, like, golf, I use whether it's Nicklaus or Woods to show what they did to demonstrate what was possible. Anytime you have an example, that makes it really easy. And a lot of times people are doing new things that haven't been done before. So there's no roadmap, but that's a fun area to play in as well. And it's to encourage that mind to say, why not go there? What do you really have to lose by stepping out in that spectrum and seeing if you can accomplish that? And when someone believes they deserve it, the fear goes down and the faith goes up, and they feel more comfortable stepping into that space. Even though it's unknown, they feel more comfortable stepping in there. So
are we the one preventing our own success? Are we the ones in our own way?
Well, there really isn't anybody else. So if you don't have other people restricting you by mental or physical force from your dreams, then yes, it comes down to you and your belief system and how much you really believe is possible for you and how honest you are with yourself in the process, meaning based on where you are in comparison to where you need to get to from a standpoint of development. If you're okay with that process, if you understand, if you want to be a music recording star, okay, where are you? What people do you have around you? Is your stuff good enough? Has it been listened to by people that give you good feedback? Is it of the quality that it needs to be? Are you being honest with yourself about it? That's also part of the process. So yes, the answer I think is yes. A lot of times we are in our own way. And you would be amazed at how many people, even at the top, have thoughts that run counter to high performance, which is, it's amazing that they've gotten where they've gotten.
Wow. I bring this up. I was recently, over the weekend, I was eating lunch and I like to just watch random YouTube interviews of successful people. And it was, this one in particular was with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And someone in the audience asked, what was the key to success? And then he responded, Warren Buffett responded, hey, I just want to let you guys know right now, if we were to take a test, like some sort of IQ test, I would not be the smartest one in this room. Most of you would score higher than me. And so it's not about, how smart you are. It's not how I did it. The problem is that you're going to get in your own way. And I was able to get out of my own way and make some investments. And for those who can get out of their own way can really write their own ticket. I was like, damn, Warren Buffett said that? Like, shit, that was really powerful. And Bill Gates is sitting next to him, nodding his head, like agreeing with him the whole time.
That's really interesting. And what that really reveals is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. And there's a huge difference in those two things. You can have all this, the book smart that is possible and a great memory and have memorized everything. But until you have wisdom, which is the real power that carries the day and allows you to see things from a wider lens so you can see the whole picture, which helps you move through the process in a much more efficient manner and stay out of your way than it does just to be book smart or what maybe intelligence is quantified as. And wisdom takes experience, it takes courage, it takes empathy with oneself. There's a lot of factors that lead to a sense of wisdom, but I guess it's a more holistic view when you're looking at wisdom versus just, going into a book, diving and reading this and then thinking you've got it figured out.
Like knowing, you know what to do, but knowing is not enough. You have to apply, you have to go through the experience and the journey.
Correct. Actually, it's a good way to say it, but it's more, you think you know what you need to do, but you really need to know it by going through the experience and allowing yourself the courage to go through it. And not always having every outcome protected, because you can't avoid the experience of life. You can't avoid the learning. But if you're willing to go into it with a humble attitude and a willingness to learn, the timing curve speeds up dramatically as it relates to you achieving what you want to achieve when you're unafraid and you're not looking at failure as something negative as it relates to who you are. It's just a part of the process. That's why scientists, when they have a failure in an experiment, they get really excited because they've eliminated a possibility that didn't work, which means they're getting closer to the answer.
I like this phrase you're using, outcome protected, where if I'm going to, let's say, perhaps expand my business, I, of course, am going to start thinking of, how can I make sure this doesn't happen? How can I make sure that doesn't happen? Kind of cover all my bases so that I can have a risk-free business, which does not exist. But of course, we want to get as close to that as possible. But I believe if I'm trying to think like that, I'm going to get caught in not taking action and being very scared and tiptoeing my actions rather than just going full force and trusting in the process and knowing that mistakes are a part of the process too.
Exactly. Well, you just said the key word, trusting the process. So if you're trying to cover every negative outcome, you're thinking from a negative mindset or a fear-dominated mindset. And it's what I've learned about life at the deepest level. It's a very elegant universe, and it knows our deepest truths, and it tries to serve those truths, whatever they are. So if it's coming from a negative perspective, the scale's going to be tilted in that fashion in order to help us achieve whatever that truth is. But if it's more faith-based, if you go up and say, hey, I've done everything I can do, now it's time to put it into action and let's see what happens and let's take it from there. That's more of a faith-based attitude in the process and in the knowing that you're going to get there. You don't know when, but you're going to go through the process and you're going to make it happen step by step, and you'll take everything that comes your way because nothing can stop your will and your persistence when it's a strong one.
Let's talk about the plateau. So I'm doing this, I'm moving forward, and I'm trusting in the process. I'm looking at other people who have done what I'm trying to do, and I'm learning from them, and I am taking action consistently. But the plateau, which I believe is in any athlete or artist, there's this sort of plateau where what got you here is no longer going to get you there, and you're not getting results anymore. You're not seeing progress. You're not seeing that growth. You're starting to see that growth curve starting to flatten out. How do we break out of that plateau?
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. That's exactly right. What happens is there's sort of this flattening out period where what worked isn't working anymore. And I think that's a really interesting point to make, is that the nature of life, the one constant in the universe, is change. And so what worked 10 years ago or 15 years ago isn't working today. The only way you know that is if you are not progressing anymore and it's plateauing or it's actually retrenching a little bit. So that's when you have to say, okay, how can this change? How can I break out of this? What can I do differently? And that's when you have to get creative and take some risks to try some different things. The dance there, or where you don't want to get caught, is in forcing something out of need. You want to be in a space where you're creatively trying things without a deep need or expectation for it to change. That's sort of the best space to be in mentally. to get the information you need to make the change. A lot of the athletes I work with, that's exactly what's happened, Andrew, is that what's getting them there isn't working anymore. And that's when this information comes in and helps them expand a little bit in an area they never really thought of before, which was their mind and what they were thinking about themselves. And they didn't realize that, wow, I always thought that I thought this is who I am. But now I guess because things have changed, I want to expand on that a little bit. So there's a little more development work to take place. And one last thing I do want to say on this topic is the nature of life is ebb and flow, because everything's energy. So there's an ebb and flow. So sometimes after the flow or after the big wave that you're on, there's naturally going to be an ebb, but that's a time to recharge, sort of rethink, refocus on what you want to achieve before the next wave comes again and you ride that one. And any great company that survived, that's been around for a long time and has thrived, that's what they do. They know ebbs come, but they manage them in a way where it allows the business to survive so they can get ready for the next evolution of what they're going to create.
And what happens if you ignore that? If you ignore the ebb and flow, like maybe you can think of a company or an athlete where they ignored that.
Yeah, well, then time plays a role. And what I mean by time is time as it relates to the distance between where they're at and what they want to achieve. It extends, it expands, because they're not paying attention to the cues that are telling them, hey, you need to make some change. If you don't make some change, it's going to take longer. Okay, hey, things are getting worse. If you don't make some change, it's going to take longer. It's like the book, I think it was Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, the classic, yeah.
Right. So the more we can go with the flow of change instead of resist change, the more we can stay in that sort of peak performing place.
So resisting change recently, man, I can't even reference things because I read so much. Like I feel like I'm like, I hate when I have to say, oh, I can't think of the title. But I recently was reading this book and it talked about how Kodak, it used to be, one of the biggest photography, like film print, all this. Kodak was a multi-billion-dollar company and it went bankrupt and someone bought them for just like $100 million, resisting change. I'm not sure where they resisted the change, but I'm sensing that, how can a company that's billions of dollars just go out? Or I think a better example would be BlackBerry.
Yeah, that's a good.
I think that's a better example. Kodak is just too long ago. Wow. And I'm trying to think of an athlete who would fit this resisting the change. I'm wondering if Allen Iverson fits that demographic.
Yeah, maybe him a little bit. It's hard to look at someone like Peyton Manning who had an 18-year career, but eventually the game, he just slowed down a little bit and the game got quicker and he went out on top and found a spot. But yeah, it's interesting. We don't hear about the athletes that that resisted change because they didn't make it much further. But the idea is to always stay on the creative edge and to always be ready for the change when it comes, rather than protecting. It's okay to protect to a certain degree what you have, but we could take something as simple as a relationship. If you rest on your laurels in a relationship and you stop treating the relationship with what it needs to stay fun and fresh and exciting, and it can get a little stale, and then there can be separation and then of connection, and that causes cracks in the relationship, which causes the opportunity for it not to continue or for other people to cause problems because there's a gap there. So it's always good to keep the things in your life that you want to keep going, keep thriving on, keep your attention on it, and always be nurturing it and looking to see how you can get better at it. It's fascinating that some of the players at the top of the game that I work with are players that have accomplished a lot, but yet that hasn't stopped them from wanting to continue to push the limit because it's who they are. And it makes sense because that's how they got there, by being creative, by opening to new ideas, by always wanting to see what's new and what's next. And that's what great companies do. So fear of protection over a product or an idea or a certain way of doing things goes against the natural flow of the universe, which is constant change. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be changing every week or every year, but when you start to see the signs, that's when it's time to get innovative.
So being able to be resilient and adaptable to the niche, to the industry that you're in, sounds like a key skill set here to your growth.
Yeah, I think those are two interesting words, both resilient in wanting to be on the edge and be a peak performer, whether it's in business or relationships or sports, but also be open and adaptable, always keeping that humility and that open mind. When one loses humility, they shut off new information. And that's what causes the ignorance that causes the fall from grace. Whether it's a company or an athlete, when they think they know it all, that's one of the biggest problems. And that's the loss of humility. So those athletes that thrive today are the most humble ones. They're open, they're grateful for their gift, and they're open to do what they need to do to stay there. I think it's the same thing in the most successful companies out there. And what's interesting about that, Andrew, is they're not always making the smartest decisions that someone who's intelligent would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. But there's a deeper wisdom that they understand why they're making that decision, which on the surface may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but they understand it, either the way they treat their employees or giving time off or whatever it is. They know that makes for a better company.
Absolutely. This has been a question that I have received a lot on, and I'm happy to share it with you. So you work with a lot of high-performing people, the best in their space, in their art or in their sport. Do you believe to be the best, to be among one of the greats, that you would have to sacrifice relationships and perhaps family on that path?
Wow, it's a really great question, and it's a really interesting one, because what I have seen at that level, whether it's college or professional, is there is a tremendous sacrifice that these athletes make that people don't realize when they watch on Saturday or Sunday or whenever they're watching them perform. There is unbelievable work and time and energy. Now, whether or not that sacrifices their family or their relationship is up to the person that they have involved in that relationship. So I've seen relationships with people who clearly understand and get that this is the amount of time and energy and effort that my significant other has to put into this, and I'm here to support him or her in any way necessary. That works. Then there isn't a sacrifice. It works. But if there's any animosity or there's extra need on the other person's part and they don't realize it, that can cause problems. Or family. But there is a sacrifice for sure that most people don't realize, who aren't as focused as they are because they're trying to be the best in the world at what they do.
I'm thinking of that. Have you seen the movie Whiplash?
I have not. No.
It's a great movie. I think you would love it because it's all about being one of the greats. It's all about being the best. But the guy wants to be one of the best drummers in jazz, and he breaks up with his girlfriend, and he says, "Hey, I want to be one of the greats, and I need more time. You're taking up my time." I'm not, supporting or saying this is bad, but just that in that path, in that process, it seems like it's one of the first things to go. But what I'm wondering though is there a way, or do you know of examples of people who were great, who did not sacrifice relationships and instead chose to really value that while on that journey to the top?
Well, there's been countless athletes that have retired because they wanted to spend more time with their family, and they could have gone on with their career and done very well and continued to be at the top of the game. But they decided that it was time to give that time back to their family because they know what it cost them and the sacrifice that they had to make in the early years. So, I know that there's been plenty of athletes that have done that. What I don't want to do is harp too much on this idea that you can't have a relationship if you're trying to be the best in the world at something. I think you can. It just has to be the right one where the roles are clearly defined and there's an understanding, and that person's going to support you in that process. But clearly, you cannot get away from the idea that when you're trying to get into that very tiny space that's reserved for, as you called, the greats, there's no doubt that there is years of work and sacrifice behind it. And I think that's often taken for granted by the public. They don't really realize the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into that when they say nobody's watching.
So I'm getting the right partner and clear communication of what's happening and expectations is essential if that's the path that one wants to take, but that it can be done.
No question about it. Jack Nicklaus did it with a family. I don't know how he did it, but he provided a great balance in his family life. And he always said that was just as important to him playing golf as anything else, because it put him in a great state of mind, a very comfortable state of mind when he was on the golf course, knowing that he was a good father and he did spend that time. So he wasn't so worried about missing the practice time as he was getting value out of being a father, because he knew that calmed him when he was on the golf course and gave him that extra belief that he needed to achieve what he achieved. In today's world, it maybe is a little different. There's a lot of very single-minded, single-focused people who just, this is all they do, and everything else is sort of a sacrifice to that. But I don't know necessarily if that works ultimately in the long run.
Which is what? Like doing both or
no,
sacrifice?
Completely disconnecting.
And just focusing on your craft, where this is everything you do is you live and breathe it for decades.
Yeah, I think that ends up putting so much pressure on the outcome that there's not another part of the identity that they have that they can rely on for a sense of being alive in the world. And that's almost too much pressure on their craft. So to have a relationship, to be connected to your family, to have some grounding in some other areas of identity creates a really nice balance.
I think the balance, especially if one gets injured and their entire identity is based around this thing that they're doing and it is now potentially gone, or they can't perform the same way they used to.
Exactly. And that's when you find out how important it is to have those connections. But that doesn't mean you can't spend, that you have to spend a majority of your time working on your craft. It's just
absolutely
you have to make sure you honor those connections as well, as best you can.
Absolutely. What would you say are some of the, like, you working with so many of these incredible people, you got to see some common habits, like daily routines, habits that these high performing people do, waking up in the morning, the way they eat, just even the littlest things. Like, what are you seeing that is just common amongst some of these great athletes or high performing people at work?
Well, definitely they have a set schedule. They know exactly what their next year is going to look like from a schedule standpoint. So they know exactly when they want to work themselves into peak performance, to where they're peaking physically and mentally. What they eat has become a huge thing. The work that I do surrounds a lot of goal setting, because what I've come to understand is that intention is the driver of everything. And so goals are our intentions. And so to write those down and to have a very clearly defined, focused idea of what you want to accomplish, so that you can build a plan of how you're going to accomplish it, is really big. And then the daily grind, just the daily working at it, the routine, the focus, the ability when things go sideways to be open and analytical about it, rather than, really upset about it for a week, because that wastes a week of time or a day of time. It's okay to get the energy out of disappointment. I think it's important exercise to find a good way to flush the energy out so that you can get back to clarity. But they do it in such a quick manner that they're focused again on what they want to achieve and how to do it. And then they can learn from that. So many times on the PGA Tour, you'll see a high-level professional, when he rarely does make a bogey, come back immediately with a birdie. It's uncanny how much that happens. And it just shows you their ability to leave the past in the past and take all that energy and focus it on the next thing they have to execute. So they double down on their focus when they realize they lost it for a moment, and it creates something really positive.
So that leads to the next question here. How do they handle failure when, just in that instance, how do you see most of these men and women handle failure, mistakes, crises?
The people at the top, I think it's really about understanding that it's not who they are. And because they're driven by this idea of who they are, it overrides the failure with, I'm going to get this back and more in the next moment. And so there's that little bit of that ego that kicks in, and that drive and that will overpowers it all, versus someone who's not a high-level athlete or not as good. They belabor the failure. They sort of live in it. It creates sort of a drama, and then that causes time and lost time. And so it takes them 3 times as long to overcome it. And because of that, they've gone through 2 more at-bats where, because they were living in the past and weren't focused on this present moment, they aren't great outcomes.
So they're not identifying with a failure. They're focusing on the present moment and what they can do right now.
Oh, they can't wait to get back in the box, because they know who they are, and that last at bat did not demonstrate it, but this one will. And because of that, I'm going to be even more focused and more ready, because when I get into that situation in that particular count, I'll know what's coming this time and I'll be ready for it.
I think that's a huge distinction there, whereas I think many may view a failure as, I am a failure and this is a sign that I should not be here. This is not for me. I should go find something where I won't fail. when in reality, you're going to fail at every single thing you do.
Yeah, you're going to have moments along the journey to it where you don't see that word failure is a tough one for me because I like learning experiences. You're going to have learning experiences. It just doesn't have that negative connotation to it. So you're going to have learning experiences where you don't achieve the outcome you intend, but through that learning experience, you're going to pick up knowledge. You're going to pick up insight. Okay, I realize that next time I can't get too highly leveraged, with my finances because that puts me in a cash crunch where I can't operate my business. So I'm going to have to be better capitalized next time. Or next time I can't be so anxious and so hyped up when I get in the box that I pull the trigger too early instead of waiting and seeing the ball just a half a second longer so I can pick it up and get the barrel on it and make great contact. So these are these finite moments that this knowledge that you learn that creates the finite difference, I should say, in the next moment and your next opportunity. So it's about being open to the process and realizing your worthiness. You said something really interesting, Andrew. You said, I am a failure. Our I am statements, which obviously is the title of the work, are the key that reveal our truths. And when we can stand in an idea of who we are through an I am statement, the ego will do everything it can to make sure it picks up all the necessary information and creates all the conditions to put that together to create it. And so it's really important to have a positive mindset, an honest mindset about yourself, but a positive one about the path that you're on, because that's what keeps you going. And all it takes is the next moment to change everything.
Wow. I think if we can, I like how you changed the language of failure into learning experiences. Mm. And it really brings us to that growth mindset where everything that we're doing is a learning experience. And even if you are winning, it is still a learning experience. Mm-hmm. I think if we can remove win and lose and just learning experience, we're always growing, we're always improving. We are likely to see good results. We are guaranteed to grow if we continue learning from our failures and even our successes.
That's really well said. It's exactly right. It's always leading you to the higher probability of success. A positive mindset leads you to the higher probability of success. It tips the scale in your favor. And again, this is not because you're operating out of any delusion. This is a very heightened state of awareness where you understand exactly where you're at. You have no doubt that you're going to get there, and you're willing to accept the process and what you need to learn to get there, versus a negative mindset that works completely in the opposite direction and there's no value to. And again, this is easier sometimes said and done, as they say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's because we don't realize as a species how much negative baggage has been carried down through generations in our DNA. Yeah. And I think it's like, I read a stat, 95 or 7% of the world thinks from a negative mindset. It's an incredible stat. I have to find that, but it's only 2 or 3% that think from a positive state of mind. We're battling a little DNA. We're battling some nurturing. If our parents were negative, had a negative mindset. And so we're stepping into new territory, but every single person is worthy of doing or achieving anything that they set their mind to. If they're honest with themselves, they have compassion, a sense of personal respect and love, they can get through almost any process. In the book, I use the example because it's a great pop culture example of the story of Rudy. Remember the movie Rudy?
Yeah.
So here was a kid, talk about having a negative mindset, coming from a family that didn't even give him a shot and laughed at him with what he wanted to accomplish. And all he really wanted to do was get on the team. That's all he really wanted to try and do. And he was so single-pointed and focused on it that he made it happen. And as life would have it, because this is what life does, is it not only gets you there, but it kind of takes you a little bit past that sometimes. And he not only got to be on the team, but he got to dress for a game. And in the last 20 seconds of a football game, he got to go out there and play defense for 2 plays and actually make a sack and go down in the history books as with a stat in Notre Dame's history. So it's one of these great examples that with persistence and intention and never giving up and believing in yourself, that you can really achieve anything, because he certainly did.
Yeah.
In that instance.
Instance, absolutely.
Yeah, in that instance.
Absolutely. When you say that, and if someone is thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me, well, maybe they haven't seen a lot of growth in their life, or they hear that and it just sounds woo-woo. Oh, this is just on a podcast, or it's from one of those YouTube videos or this book. What would you say to that individual right now who's just thinking right now, that doesn't apply to me?
Has anybody else that you know in your life, in the world, done what you're looking to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. If the answer is yes, then guess what? From this moment forward, you can create it. If you put your mind to it. Now, you have to be, now, if I say I want to go play for the Phoenix Suns, at my late 40s at 5'7", I have to understand the way the system works and what the probabilities of that are. Or if I say I want to be on the next mission to Mars, I have to realize the process I need to go through to get into the space program and whatever I need to do to start working my way into the list of people that are going on that mission. That could take 50 years. So you have to acknowledge what the process is. But if it's something like creating a business or having a successful loving relationship or achieving some status of health and physical fitness, there are millions on the planet that have done it. So why not you?
Yeah. Very powerful.
Are you ready? Yeah.
Why not you?
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive into the knowledge round. Just going to ask you some more kind of like rapid fire questions, just kind of gut responses from yourself. So are you ready for the knowledge round?
Yes, I am.
All right, Howard, here we go. So you might be wondering, why would I ever invest in a coach? I've never done anything like that before. Well, it's going to shorten your learning curve and save you the time that it would take to achieve your goal. You can avoid making mistakes that you would otherwise make. You'll get more results because everything will be tailored to your specific needs and challenges. The coach will hold you accountable so you can't procrastinate, so you can't be lazy, so you can't say, I didn't have the time. You'll be challenged and pushed harder than you've ever been pushed. You'll have conversations so powerful that you'll feel more energized, alive, and confident and certain about the goals that you have in front of you and where you want to go. Most importantly, where you want to be. You'll go farther than you've ever gone before when you have a coach. If you want to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program, go to kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program. You have got to understand that every successful person in the world invests in coaching to go from good to great. And if you're already a high achiever, then how much more could you achieve if you had a high performance men's coach at your side to push you even further? Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply for our high performance men's coaching program. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling completely lost and unsure of their purpose, lacking a sense of direction in their life?
Know that information is always coming to you, and that's exactly why this moment and these words are coming to your ear right now, because you asked for new information and here it showed up. So there's something even in this moment for you.
And what would someone do with that? In this moment, there's something here for them. What do they do with that?
What I think it offers is that, again, it's a very elegant universe. I think when we ask questions, the universe finds different, unique ways to bring us information and insight that can tip the scales for us and get us thinking in a new way. And so specifically to that question that you asked, this moment is one of those for somebody who's listening. Like, I'm just happy to be in the space with you talking about this for this moment, serving that individual who's listening right now. But this is truly, I don't want to sound too weird, but it truly is the universe talking to you and telling you you've been heard. Here's a bit of information. It's up to you if you want to take this further and explore some of these ideas further, but it's here for you.
Really good. And what do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
Stronger, grounded men. A limited idea about who they are, a fake idea of who they should be, or some pop culture idea who they should be or what they need to do to feel like a man, when it's much more simple than flashy, materialistic identity. It's more of connection based. It's more of humility, compassion, a true connection with somebody. That's what I think really makes a man, is someone who honors himself and honors other people in life. And that's what I believe brings the highest form of respect.
Yeah. And so I want to give credit to your work here that you've created, the 2 books you have, I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, and then also your second, Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. However, what have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey? Maybe books that you recommend often to the people you work with?
Wow, that's a good question. So influential books on me, any book by Napoleon Hill, I think it's timeless material. That's been very good work. Wow, there's several of those titles just under Napoleon Hill with probably 3 different titles: Think and Grow Rich, Outwitting the Devil. Some really good stuff there in his works are the 3 that I would probably recommend the most. There's been some other stuff a little deeper into spirituality, some work by David Hawkins, Power versus Force, and the Conversation with God series by Neil Donald Walsh was a very interesting take on life and how it works with us. So those are a couple authors that I've enjoyed, that have done a nice job presenting material. Very nice job.
Really good. Yeah, I've been hearing quite a bit about Power versus Force lately. I'll have to check that out more and finally pick that up. But just I do these interviews so much. I mean, everyone's giving me books to read. I'm like, all right, I gotta slow it down here. Next
but
question.
I'm a little biased.
You're biased?
A little biased on my own work, but
oh,
yeah,
of course. What would you say to your 25-year-old self if you had 60 seconds with 25-year-old Howard and knowing what you now know today? What would you tell him to do? What would you tell him not to do?
Wow. I tell you that the perfection that you're searching for every day of your life, you already are that. So go out and share that with the world. Go out and experience that. Be fearless and courageous and follow your heart and trust that above all things.
Anything you tell them not to do? Any bad?
Stop. Yeah. Don't listen and be influenced so much by other people's opinions, what you should do. And don't feel like you have to measure up to so many other people that you see. You are your own unique individual. Just keep developing that and finding yourself in that, and your path will naturally unfold. That's what I would tell my 25-year-old self.
Yeah, just letting that kind of sink in. I think it's letting the path naturally unfold, almost insinuating that you're allowing that the failures and the challenges that you've had in your past, you're almost allowing that to happen, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, well, you're allowing yourself to be comfortable enough with who you are and confident enough in who you are as a person that the real path and the interests that you have will surface. You'll allow them to surface in your mind. You won't judge them. Oh, I'm interested in art. I want to try and do something in that field. I know that my friends laughed or my parents thought I should become a doctor, but that's the field that really lights me up, and that's what I want to do. And I think a lot of times as young people, we're so worried about what other people think that we need to do for our lives or who we should be in order to be accepted by the world, that we don't follow that natural instinctive path. And you talk to people later in their life, they often say, I wish I would have followed my heart earlier and done where my passion was and trusted that, because that's where your energy is. That's where your most powerful energy is.
Yeah, and it's really powerful. It's a book. It's also an article that's gone viral, which is the top 5 regrets of the dying, where there was a hospice nurse who kind of summarized, like, she had a full career of being a hospice nurse, and she summarized her 5 regrets. And one of them being, I wish I hadn't worked so hard on things that didn't matter. I wish I would have done what I really wanted to do with my life.
Yeah. And I think more and more young people are allowing themselves to do that, or opening more to that idea.
Yeah, I think so too. And now, any last parting words for the audience here before we close out?
Just to remember that every single moment gives you the amazing opportunity to redefine, declare, and demonstrate who you choose to be. And the moment that you take that opportunity to do that, everything can change. So there's always a new moment to create the change that you desire in your life. And this is one of those.
And what's exciting? This is just, I'm curious. What are you excited about coming in the new year here? What's getting you out of bed? What's driving you?
Well, I'm writing a 3rd book, so that's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. And besides the work that I do all the time, it's, sharing it with my family and seeing them continue to go on their paths. I have I have a 20-year-old daughter now and a 17-year-old son. So that's a big part of what drives me every day. And I'm excited for this new generation that's coming to a greater sense of self-awareness and is really connected to creating change in the world from a connective standpoint. Powerful. It's not without its ups and downs and its triumphs and troubles, but it's definitely a theme I'm seeing amongst a lot of young people, which I'm very encouraged about.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too, and really excited. Can you talk at all about the next coming book you have, or is it more still? I asked some people, they say they can't talk about it.
No, I can tease a little bit with it. Yeah. It's I Am in Time in a Bottle. It really focused on the self-awareness and the creative process, and this book's going to blend the two into a very distilled, broken down how-to version of it that's going to be very powerful. Now, you can't avoid the real work. So that's why the first 2 books were designed like they were to be thorough, deep reads. But for those who want it really concise and really driven to a very step-by-step how-to point, that's what this book is going to be about, with some great examples from all the stuff that I've experienced over the last 5 to 7 years in teaching and coaching people how to understand the power that they have within them. So it'll be sort of a combination of that.
All right. I'm excited for the next book. Keep me in mind when you're launching that book. And for
Definitely will.
Yeah. And for the audience, howardfalco.com. That's FALCO. And also just go to Amazon, type in Howard Falco, and you can check out his books, I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, and Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. And so, Howard, thank you so much for sharing your story and wisdom here with my audience on this show. You've really given us a huge awakening, an eye-opener, and I think a big boost for the coming new year here.
Well, I really appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks for having me on, and I really appreciate what you do. It's great stuff, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.